This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, not busy with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety may all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be happy. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to false views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world.
Thank you, Ajahn, and I'll leave it up to you now to explain about meditation to us and give us a guided meditation and a little talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Well, tonight I wanted to talk about, at the beginning, the kind of meditation we would do, and then go into the meditation. And the type of meditation I wanted to do is called counting meditation, or meditation with counting. And if you think this is a technique that nobody uses, there is a manuscript copy of an article that Ajahn Brahm wrote. I don't think it's ever been printed, but it's all about counting. And Bhante G also, Bhante Gunaratana also talks about counting. In fact, he has a student, when I was there, he has a student who lives in another state and has a meditation group there. This person is not a monk, but a lay person who is very, very skilled in meditation. And he came once and told Bhante Ji that of all the techniques he used, the most useful to him for the students in his class was counting. It brought people into a state of ease and well, we use the term concentration, and Ajahn Brahm uses the term stillness. He said it worked better than any other technique. And I found for myself, my own personal experience is that what brought me into a greater sense of peace, or state of peace, was counting at the very beginning. I don't use it so much anymore, but I think after this little session, I think I'll be using it more. So the idea of counting, if you've never heard of it or you don't know what it is, there are different ways to do it. If you've never done it before, you can use a very simple method, and that's simply on the out breath. We'll use the simplest methods I can think of. On the out breath, you count a number in your mind. And if you're good at visualization, later on you can visualize the number in your mind too. You start out 1 on the out breath, and then 2, 3, up to 5. And then you can repeat that if you want, or you can go backwards. You can start 5, you say 5, and then you say 5 again, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and so on, as long as you like. All right, that's about the simplest method I can think of, except for simply going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which you can do on and on without going in reverse. However, the way I would suggest that you do it is to start at 1 and go progressively up to 10. And I tend to use my fingers, or think of my fingers a lot. So you go all the way from 1 to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, I don't do them quite that much, but 1, 2, 3, I sort of think of my fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I only say that because I think if you move your fingers around it might be a little distracting, but it's up to you. So you start at 1 with your first finger, and you go progressively over both hands up to 10. And just as we did with 1 to 5, you start with that last finger and go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then you go up again. Then you start at 2. Okay? This is a more complicated method. Instead of going back to 1, you start at 2 and go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and then 3. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. And then 4, 5. Is that clear? Is that clear to everybody? Have I made it confusing? Is everybody clear on what I'm getting at and what I'm suggesting that you do? Anybody want to know it's off? Is everything off? If anybody has a question, please ask.
Ajahn, can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Do we do 1 number per breath? Or are we counting quite quickly?
No, it's one number per exhalation. It's hard to say it and do it at the same time. But if you can hear me, I go in 1, 2. Of course, I don't do it that way. I think the number in my mind. I don't say it out loud. Okay, and then, okay, anyone else? Okay, yeah, that's very important. I'm sorry I didn't make that clear. 1, 2, and then, okay, so we go up, gradually going up, and starting, we start at 1, and then we go backwards, and then we start at 2 and go up, and then go backwards, and then we start at 3 and go up, 4, 5, starting at 6, at 7. This is a good place, by the way, to use your visualization, because the hardest thing is probably to remember what number you, after you get going on this for a while, it's hard to remember sometimes what number you just started on. Oh, was I on 5 or was I on 7? Wait a minute. So visualize the number in your mind if you can use that, and just see it being painted in your blank space in your mind. And then you go all the way up, and you get to 9, and then you get to 10, and then 10. Now you have a choice. You can go back and start at 1, or you can go backwards and go 10, and 9, 8, 7, 6. Or you can do this. You can go 10, 9, 10, 9, 8, 10, 9, 8, 7, all the way back to 1. And then start over. 1. Now, 3. Okay, so you make a cycle out of this, and they say if you can do the cycle 3 times without goofing up, making a mistake, forgetting where you are, then you're pretty concentrated. Shouldn't use that word, but you're pretty still. And you can drop this. This is not intended to be used for forever. Don't be distressed. You don't have to use it for the whole meditation. You use it in order to bring about the stillness you need to really watch your breath. Because after a while, you'll see, if you experiment with this and do it, and try it, and really be consistent with it, and you'll see how it will work. And the only thing I left out is the rule that if you get goofed up somewhere in the middle and you forget where you are, you have to start over from 1. Okay, that's the rule. You have to start over from 1, and using whatever method you've decided to use, you start over and you go 1, 2, and so on. All right? And you could use whichever of these methods. If they're not clear, I can explain them again if I went a little too fast, or if it's... The thing is, you can pick your own way of doing it, of going. You don't have to go backwards if you don't want to. You can do, as I say, you can do 10, 9, 10, 9, 8, 10, 9, 8, 7, or you can go all the way back from 10 to 1 and go all the way back, 10 backwards, 10 to 2, 10 to 3, and so on. You can make it up as you go along. You can try different techniques. If it's too complicated, then try it with 5. And what I left out with 5, you can add, you go 1 and then start at 2. This is really simple. And then you start at 3, and then you start 4, and 5, and then start over again at 1, or go backwards, however you want to do it. All right. All right. Now I have an out for those who think they can't stand counting, and it's the worst thing they ever heard of. I offer 2 other kinds of meditation for you. It's up to you, because I can't coach this kind of meditation. This is one thing. Usually I coach a little bit, or intermittently. I would try to say something to encourage people to stay on the track and so on. But with counting, it's really not possible to count and coach. I mean, I don't think it is. Anyway, so I offer you the other kind of meditations, which is one breath meditation, in and out breathing, in-out breath, as we usually do, which is the Buddha's favorite meditation. And I remind you that on the in-breath, as you go along, one thing to remember is that you can visualize, if you can, or the drawing in of energy, drawing the energy in on the in-breath. On every in-breath, you're drawing in this energy. The Indian people call it prana. I'm sure you've probably heard that name, which is an energy, but is also breath. All right, and the other kind of meditation, I bet you can probably guess what it is metta. And I personally think that everybody should do a little metta every day as a, what would you call it, a remedy to get things back on the track, especially in the morning. If you've had a rough day, do some metta. A half hour a day shouldn't be too much metta. And how would you do it if you're not sure? I would say, first, the easiest ways, I would start with myself, and I would say, on the in-breath, may I be, and on the out-breath, be happy. May I, on the in-breath, and be happy on the out-breath. May I be happy. In, out, may I be happy. May I be happy. Not out loud, in your mind. I don't mean that you should say this. If you want to say it, you can try doing that and see how it works. The other way is, instead of saying, you can put somebody else in that place. May she be happy, or may Mary be happy, or may John be happy. Or may, the other way, may all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. And you might want to start out with one and go on to the others, depending how long you have. The classical way, I'll remind you, is that you start with yourself and do that for, say, some X number of minutes, 5 minutes, or 2 minutes, or whatever you have. And then you go on to a mentor, somebody you revere, somebody who's like a teacher. You might pick Ajahn Brahm or someone like that, a mentor. Somebody who's helped you greatly and you have a lot of respect for. But not somebody that you're involved with in a romantic situation, And none of these are actually. The next one, the third one, is a very good friend. There again, it's just a friendship relation. A very good friend. And you do that, and then the next one that you do is a neutral person. That means a person whom you see often, but don't really know at all. You have never formed a relationship. You don't have strong likes or dislikes of this person because you don't know them really. You just, maybe you see them at work quite often. But pick that person and extend metta to them. Then the last one is considered very important for attaining jhana, in fact. At least in the commentaries, it says this: you have to be able to extend metta to an adversary, somebody that you dislike, somebody that you consider possibly even an enemy, or somebody that you're having trouble with, maybe not an enemy, maybe not even an adversary, but somebody that you have some bad feelings for. And you extend metta to them. This is, we start with this at the end because it's the hardest. If you start with it at the beginning, it may throw you way off. It may be so difficult that you just stop. So it's better to start with the one with yourself, because you have to have metta for yourself, or it's very difficult to extend it to anyone else. So starting with yourself is the classical way to start with this. So that's metta. There are other ways of doing it, extending it to the 4 directions, or the whatever number 8 directions, and to the skies, to the depths, and so on, that you may know. So you can add those in if you want to do metta. So we're getting close. Are there any questions about either in-out breath or metta? Everybody everybody know what they're going to do during the meditation period now? Have you decided? I hope some people will do counting. I always sort of worry that, nobody's going to do it, because people tend to not generally, maybe I shouldn't say this, maybe this will warp your mind about it, but it's true that people, for some reason, find it too boring or something. But I'll tell you, it works. I guarantee. That's why I picked it, because I want people to be able to increase the stillness of their meditation. You have to, if you want to go deep. Okay, so give it a try. It's only one session and it's only a half hour. And your camera is swinging around. Oh, you're doing that. Okay. Now, shall I? Yes, I better. I can start the meditation now. My clock says 7:25. Does your clock say 7:25? Yes. All right. Then I'm going to start, and I'll be doing counting. So I won't be coaching. I won't be encouraging you as you go along. I'll just do the counting in my own mind. And then, after a half hour, at 5:02, I'm sorry, we'll start. Okay, all right, now we'll start the meditation with 1. I'm going to interrupt and make a slight change as you go up from 1 to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then don't go backwards just yet. Go back and start at 2. And then go from 2 to 10, then 3 to 10, And don't go backwards until you've completed all, and go from 9 to 10, and then 10, and then go backwards. It will be less confusing. So we'll go on. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. And so we'll end this meditation session. And if you're turning lights on, open your eyes slowly, get used to the light. And if you have any questions, you can think of any kind of questions you might have. If anybody was doing counting, I'd love to hear any reactions they had from their experience, whether it was helpful, whether it was not helpful. Any opinions about the meditation?
Hello, Bhante. Thank you very much for sort of returning to counting. I remember starting at BSWA nearly 30 years ago, and Ajahn Brahm taught counting meditation. And then I had a bit of a break, and I remember it had disappeared. And I was sort of thinking, did he or didn't he? So it was interesting to come back to it, and at the beginning very aware with the counting of a number of aspects of the mind, the aspect of the part of my mind wanting to control the counting, control the breath. So seeing that popping up, so working with easing off on that, and observing at times how it's possible to count and mind wander at the same time, and if you don't do it for too long, not to lose it completely. So it was fascinating at the beginning, and then just finding over the time just the steadiness that arose through doing it, just the stillness that arose through doing it. So it was terrific to come back to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that opinion, reaction. Did you find that it helped you attain stillness?
Absolutely.
Yes. Oh, good.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't an immediate stillness. It took its time, but by the end, in particular,
Yes.
feeling a really steadiness of mind.
Good.
I was a bit annoyed with you when you brought us out, I must admit.
Oh, well, you can do it on your own.
Exactly. It wasn't personal.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Ajahn, this is Rachel. Same thing for me with Catherine. I remembered Ajahn Brahm teaching it a lot.
Oh,
So
really?
When I first started.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we did a lot of counting meditation with him and with Ajahn Dhamma.
Oh.
And so that was my very first introduction to meditation, doing that. And it was lovely to come back to it, because I didn't think I'd seen it or heard anyone teach it for a long time. A question from me. When you said to do the counting on the exhalation,
Yes.
and I found that I was counting each number on both the inhalation and exhalation, but by going one, 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 just as one word, but on the breath in, breath out. Is that it? I mean,
I would say you pick your style, whatever you want to do, whatever you find is most conducive to your meditation, as long as you're staying on the track. I only offer what I've done. I don't know if I've done that in particular. You mean that you keep the number in your mind for the inhaling and the exhalation.
Yeah, the same number of inhalation. Like I just go into out.
I don't see anything to complain about. If you can reach stillness doing that, and fine. I mean, Yeah, I want people to be able to use their own method in this, and the methods of there are different methods of counting, and some are more complicated than others. And I saw some complicated methods in one of Bhante Ji's books, but I don't know where it is now. I don't have it. But I'm sure that you can, if you like this method, you can figure out ways of doing it. There are different ways of doing it. You can figure out. I named a few, but you can mix them up, mix and match. Okay?
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, of course.
Catherine and I were obviously thinking on similar lines. So Catherine mentioned that she was able to still have thoughts and be counting.
Oh, yes.
So, and when I first did it, I used to never get past one because thoughts had come in. And initially, I'd always believed that the idea was to have the number without thought. Can you just comment on that?
Well, I can't do that. I probably have thoughts all the way through.
Oh, okay.
The stillness will come, but it's after quite a while of doing it, of really doing it without thoughts. It is possible, but not in a half hour. If you haven't been doing it for a while, that would be pretty difficult. Not impossible. I'm sure Ajahn Brahm could do it. No, I would say you do what you can, and if the thoughts are there, you notice them, and return to the counting. That's one reason why visualization of the number can help sort of drive away the thoughts. It kind of takes the place of the thoughts, because the thoughts are the thing that knock you off your number and cause you to forget it later as you get down the line. You say, what number did I start with? Oh, whoops. But if you have it, if you draw it big in your mind, if you have this mind space that's black and you paint a big white 7 on it, you can remember it, maybe, probably as you do that. And that will help you stay on the track without so many words.
Thank you. I forgot all about visualization. Thank you.
Plus, some people tend to it more.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't, or maybe you do. I don't know. That's another way. Anyone else before we? No.
Sorry, Pinda, you go.
Sorry, no, you go on, Jim.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. That was really fantastic. It reminded me, I'm not sure if you actually described the specific method that I then used, but it reminded me of what I think I read about in a book by Thich Nhat Hanh. I'll just show it here now. This Breathe, You Are Alive. And I'm not sure when I first read it and I tried this technique and I thought that's good kind of thing, and then somehow forgot about it. And so it's been a fantastic reminder to hear that from you today. And it really felt like that's the kind of stillest meditation that I've had in quite a while. So thank you so much.
Are you willing to divulge that technique, or is it too difficult to explain? I'm just curious.
Explain it. Because it's possible that I got a little bit confused in all the different methods that you explained.
Well, maybe we better not, because of the time element.
Yeah.
It's getting late, and I'm supposed to give a talk.
Yeah,
So-
no problem. But yeah,
so-
thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for that comment. That's very interesting. By all means, if you have a good technique, stick with it. Pinda.
Oh, Bhante Sangharatna, it was just a comment. I first came across counting with you about 13 odd years ago.
With me?
That's right, when you used to come to the Armadale Hall.
Uh-huh.
That's right.
Well, it couldn't have been that long ago, because I've only been here 11 years.
So that was probably 2010 then. Okay.
Yeah, it could have been. Could have been, yeah.
And I tried it at that stage, but maybe I was too impatient or something. So I used to get frustrated because I used to lose count. And then the rule is if you lose count, you're going to start from one again. So I tried it a few times and said, no, this is not for me. But today, it worked quite well.
And you haven't done it since then?
No. Because it brought bad memories to me, but
Eureka!
and having to start all over again from one.
Oh,
So
that's great.
today it works actually. So I don't know, something's changed, and so
That's
do it
good.
more often now.
Well,
So that's great.
I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you.
That's funny. Okay, anybody else? Okay. Rachel?
So if you're able to give us a talk,
I'm good.
that would be wonderful.
Yeah. You want me to start?
Yes, please.
Okay. You're going to be annoyed with me because I don't have a fantastic memory, especially now, and I have lots of things that I can read from. And I'm sure I probably will. Okay, so our subject is nutriment. Has anybody heard a talk on nutriment before? Because I don't believe I've ever heard a talk on nutriment, and yet it's a very important subject. I remember when I was leaving Bhavana, Bhante Ji said he was going to write a book on it, but I don't think he ever did. Nutriment is the four nutriments. The four nutriments is the subject, and they're tied in with dependent origination. But don't worry, I'm not going to talk about dependent origination, except one little example that's very simple and very clear, just to show. And in Sangyutta Nikaya, one of the Nikayas of the scriptures, the section on dependent origination, this is where you find the sutta that has the four similes of the nutriments that I'm going to talk about. They're very brief, but they're very powerful. I think they're maybe the most powerful similes in the suttas. I don't know, I haven't read all the suttas, but I have a feeling they're certainly pretty dramatic and pretty gruesome at times. Okay, and so, and in fact, this although it mentions it doesn't mention the dependent origination directly in the suttas. So we have the four nutriments. The four nutriments are simply eating, sense perception. It's also called contact or pasa in Pali, if you're familiar with Pali. Pasa, contact in the mind with the sense perceptions. And volitional thought, or as Ajahn Brahm is calling it now, will, or you can call it sankhara, or even you can say this is the origin of kama. This is kama. And the last one is none other than consciousness of all kinds. Consciousness. Those four, which are very familiar to us, are the four nutriments. Now you'll notice, I don't know if you heard the last time I talked about the aggregates. And these, you can notice they're similar to the aggregates, not exactly the same, but they fit into the aggregates. But it's a different idea. The idea well, I'll start with the similes, and that will explain it a little better, and then we'll talk about this, what the meaning of the similes is. And these similes come from the Buddha. The first simile is eating. And it starts with a story about a couple. You've probably heard this story before. This is the most famous one. A couple, man and woman, and a little child, very little child, start on a trek through the desert. And it's a very long desert, and they take enough food, they think. They think they have enough food to make it the whole distance. And unfortunately, halfway through, they run out of food. So they decide, they talk about it, and they don't know what to do. But first one in the commentary, it's explained this way, that first one decides to be the victim, or not the victim, but the father decides to give his life, and then they eat him. He will die, and they will use his flesh and dry it and make their way. And the mother refuses, and she says, "I'll never survive with just you. It's impossible. Take my life and use my body as your nutriment and then as your food so that you can make it, and then we'll at least have you and the child." And he refuses that too. And then finally, horrible as it may sound, they decide to use their child as their food, because they can at least, the two of them can make it, and then they can have another child. And there's no possibility of getting through the desert without food, and there is none on that desert. There is no oasis. And so they do that. They dry the flesh of the child, and they cry when they eat it. And the Buddha asked the monks he's talking to, "Do you think, monks, that they eat this with enjoyment, or they eat it with the idea that they will become physically beautiful, or they eat it because it tastes good?" And the monks say, no, they eat it because they want to survive, and this is the only way. And so they make it through the desert to the other side. They do survive. And the Buddha says to the monks, and this is the way a monk should look upon physical food, eating. Not to eat with enjoyment of taste, not to eat to make himself beautiful, to beautify his body, not for entertainment, and not for the best foods, but to simply survive. And this is the way a monk should eat their food. That's the first simile. And he says once a person, a student, understands the nutriment of eating, then he will understand all the 5 senses. Actually 6 senses, but in the edition it says 5 senses. And when he has understood the 5 senses, there is no longer any fetter which can hold him into returning to a life on this earth. Now this one is different from the next 3 because it talks about an anagami. It talks about not returning to this, having a fetter that will pull him back into rebirth. It doesn't talk about nibbana. It is not about the arahat. This first one is about an anagami, just to make that clear, because it's made clear in the suttas. All right, so that's the first. The second one is sense impression. Pasa, as I said, pasa means contact, and it means mental contact with the sense impressions. And the simile is this. We have a flayed cow. Flayed, if you're not familiar with that word, means skinned. This cow has been skinned, and yet it wishes to live, and it's still living, and still eating, and yet all the skin has been skinned away from its body. And wherever it goes, if it goes next to a building, the insects on the building jump down and they start chewing on its flesh, which is exposed. And if it goes next to a tree, the insects in the tree fall down on it and start eating it. And if it goes in the water, the little animals, the little whatever they are in the water, start nibbling on it, nibbling on this, wherever it goes. And in the fresh air, all the insects, all the mosquitoes and flies and so on crowd around and start eating it. And yet this poor cow wishes to live. And this is the simile for sense impressions. Why? And for every split second, tiny particle of a second, we have hundreds, millions of sense impressions coming into our mind. All the time we're bombarded with them. Just as this cow, this flayed cow, is bombarded with these insects. And they're chewing on it. And the Buddha says, one who has understood sense impressions and has understood the three feelings or three sensations. Okay, the three sensations are pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Once one has understood this nutriment of sense impressions, this is a nutriment, then this student has understood the three feelings. And once a student has understood the three feelings, then there is no more work for that student to do. He has succeeded in his path. So that's the simile of the flayed cow. The next one is volitional thought, or as I say, sankhara is its common name, and Ajahn Brahm uses the term will. And will is the nutriment for rebirth on the three planes. It's also considered a nutriment for the three types of craving. Rebirth on the three planes is, the three planes are material, fine material, and non-material. There is higher rebirth, but those are the three planes. Okay, and the simile is this. A man is walking along, in the country, and he's walking along, and he's a man who wants to live and loves life and wants to go on living. And two strong men grab him. One grabs each arm, and they pull him, and he sees with horror, they're pulling him towards a pit that's about his height or a little higher, and the pit is filled with burning coals. They're glowing coals. It's not smoking and not flaming. This is made, for some reason in the simile, it's made clear that they're glowing coals, but he knows as he gets closer and closer that if they push him into the pit, he'll die and suffer horrible pain. And yet, time after time, in terms of rebirth, time after time, we are pulled to this pit. And the pit of the coals is samsara. The first sutta of the Buddha as an enlightened being, that he said, right after he was enlightened, he said, I won't say the whole thing, just the beginning, through many a life I wandered in samsara, seeking but not finding the builder of this house. Sorrowful is it to be born again and again. So this is one of the meanings of this. And volition is thinking. It's all we do in our mind to build and create the world. It's negative and it's positive. And so we have these two strong men. And in the commentary that I read, the two strong men were symbols of the, let's say, the positive comic force and the negative karmic force. So both of the karmic forces are pulling us towards samsara and rebirth. It's not that we just do bad things. It's not that. It's that either create karma. Karma being thought, word, and deed, basically, is karma. Will, the will to do. Okay, so that's, and again the Buddha says, one who has understood will, let's say karma, or volitional formations, has done all the work he needs to do. So that one too. See, those two are enough to become an arahat, the one and the one before this. The last one is consciousness. And the simile of consciousness is even more gruesome. I'm sure you've probably heard these, but in this one, the king's army takes a robber. They capture him, and they take him before the king, and the king says, the punishment is that he be put before a stake and 100 spears in the morning, he be pierced with 100 spears in the morning. And so they do that, and yet he stays alive. And he suffers terrible pain, but they tell the king, and he says, what has happened to this robber? And they tell him, and he says, then in the noontime, he must do the same. Another 100 spears he must be pierced with. And they do that, and yet he survives with another 100 spears. And they tell the king, and again he says, if he survived, then see him survive another 100 spears in the evening. And they do that, and yet this robber survives again. And the Buddha asked the monks, would he, if he suffered 300 spear strokes, would he enjoy that? Or would he suffer terrible pain? And the monk says, Bhante, he would suffer terrible pain with merely one stroke of the spear, one throw of the spear, much less 300. And the Buddha says, like that, if one understands consciousness, and consciousness, by the way, is the nutriment for nama-rupa, which means name and body, or mind and body, mind and body. If one understands mind and body, then one has done all the work he needs to do. All right, now, I'm being 23. All right. I'll go back to the beginning because I'll go back to sense perception, because this is the one where I can give a clear idea of dependent origination. So in dependent origination, contact, the arising of contact causes the arising of feeling. As I said, one is a nutriment for the other, and the dependent origination is a causal chain. And these links are caused by craving. So with the arising of the three feelings, there is the arising of craving. All right? Well, we know that craving from the Four Noble Truths, craving is the cause of suffering, right? Suffering is caused by the arising of craving, the second noble truth. And so we have this causal change. We have contact, and then we have the three feelings. We have pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And then if we give attention to those, we have craving. After craving comes clinging, and by that time it's too late. So we have craving, and we have the whole chain of dependent origination. All right. I'm going to ask if there are any questions because it's so late now. But I have many things I can read. All right. No questions?
Okay. Just a quick question around how would you describe nutriment in this sense? Is there another word or a phrase that you could substitute in this sutta?
For all of the different similes. Food, nutriment is food. Everything has to be fed in the world. The Buddha says not exactly those words, but everything depends on nutriment in this world to stay living. Does that help? Something more.
So sense contact is a nutriment.
Nutriment for the feelings. The feelings.
Vedana.
Yes.
And the sankhara are a nutriment for.
Well, given in the commentary, it's the rebirth.
Uh-huh.
Rebirth on the 3 planes, which I mentioned. And
So each of the 4 is a nutriment for something different.
yes, and those are in dependent origination, but I don't want to go into those because it gets too complicated and you have to know a lot more about it. You have to know a lot more about dependent origination in depth. I only gave the one because it was the clearest. Yes, that's right. They make up a chain, and they're nutriments within them.
Thank you.
Is that clear enough? Is that clear?
Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn. There are a number of questions in the chat box. If I read them out to you, is that okay?
In the what?
In the chat box.
In the chat books?
So people have written them to us rather than speaking because not everybody wants to speak.
Oh,
So
okay.
the first, you've got a lot of thank yous, by the way, for the counting meditation. Apeksha from Adelaide says, Bante, this is the first time I've used this type of counting meditation. It was great. But she says, what would you do if your breath becomes short?
What would you do if your breath became short?
Yeah.
Well, I know this sounds stupid and I'm kidding around, but I would take a very deep breath.
Okay.
And I would relax, as Bhante says, relax to the max. And let the whole meditation just go. And just relax, and then when you feel a little bit more relaxed, try it again, try over, start at 1, and just enjoy it. Okay?
Thank you. She's nodding.
Okay? Try that, something along those lines. You may think of something that will relax you more.
Okay.
Okay.
The next one is someone who had to leave because they had to deal with children, but they wanted to tell you that they appreciated the counting meditation. And then there's a question from, I think this is Nathan. Hi, Bante. Speaking of the desert and insects, I'm currently working in the desert and there are so many flies. Do you have any suggestions on how to deal with flies or mosquitoes from a Buddhist perspective?
Well, that kind of question is certainly answered by Ajahn Brahm in many of his talks. He talks about his experience as a Thai monk and how he sat out in the evening, and Ajahn Chah was the teacher. And he and another monk counted maybe 60 mosquitoes on their arms at one time, because for some reason they liked the Westerners more even than the Thai people. I'm not sure why that was. I heard her, I can't remember why. He said, his answer is, you accept it, you feel it, and you just go inside. If we're talking about meditation, if you're working with it, once again, relax and see the mosquitoes as fellow beings. All right? That's about the best answer I can give. Another answer is to listen to Ajahn Brahm's discourses, where he, especially where he talks about this. He does a better job than I can. I've never experienced anything like that, to be honest.